All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. One of the most anticipated games of this college basketball season is set to take place tomorrow night in Lexington when Kentucky hosts Arkansas. And this is not your run of the mill February conference game, as this is going to mark the first time that John Calipari will return to Kentucky after leaving for Fayetteville last spring. And of course, the biggest question heading into tomorrow night's contest is centered around what kind of reception that Coach Cal will receive upon his return to Rupp Arena. Now, for 15 years, John Calipari was the head basketball coach at Kentucky, where he compiled a record of 410 to 123, and only the great Adolph Rupp won more games at Kentucky than Coach Cal. But for Coach Cal, unfortunately, the end was less than spectacular. Steve P, what's going on, my man? You're saying baseball is your favorite sport, but you do love the way that they dribble up and down the court. Well, you know what? Hang tight, buddy, because we got a lot to talk about with that as well. But I'm going to say this, man. Coach Cal, his highlight at Kentucky clearly came in 2012 when he led the Wildcats to the national championship, their eighth in men's basketball overall. And of course, the first half of Coach Cal's time at Kentucky went as expected. We're talking about a Wildcats program that made the Final Four four times in his first 6 years there. But the second half of Coach Cal's time in Lexington did not go as well, as Kentucky has not made the Final Four since 2015, and they have not made it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. So we're talking about the Sweet 16 and beyond since 2019, and that's a no-no in Lexington. And suddenly, some of the folks in Lexington and around this Kentucky program, they kind of were getting tired of Coach Cal's act as it was wearing thin. And the cherry on the top, if you will, came last March when we saw Kentucky lose to a 14 seed Oakland squad in the first round of the NCAA tournament, which marked the second time in 3 years that the Wildcats were ousted in round one by a double digit seed. We saw them as a 2 seed in 2022 lose to the 15 seed St. Peter's. And of course, that St. Peter's club went on a historic run as they got all the way to the Elite Eight. But Calipari has new life. He's staying in the SEC. He's at Arkansas, of course, and it's going to be interesting to see. Like I said before, how is he going to be received tomorrow night in coming back to Lexington? Now, yes, John Calipari won at Kentucky. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But again, getting back to the second half of his time there, winning and just getting to the NCAA tournament is not good enough. It's not going to get it done, and it's not going to keep everybody happy at Kentucky. And the Wildcats, okay, they're in pretty good hands right now. They're doing pretty good for themselves so far this season under first year head coach Mark Pope. And you look at a guy like Mark Pope, he knows what it takes to win at Kentucky. We're talking about a guy who was a starter on Kentucky's national championship team in 1996 under head coach Rick Pitino. And of course, this is his first year at Kentucky. He's had some coaching experience before, most recently at BYU. But nonetheless, already the Wildcats, they've got non-conference wins over both Duke and Gonzaga, as well as conference wins so far over Florida, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. And that's important because this is a very stacked SEC conference this year. 11, 12, maybe 13 of the 16 teams in the SEC are headed to the NCAA tournament. That is how deep that this league is this season. And we're talking about right now, okay, 10 of those 16 teams are ranked in the top 25. So that just gives you an idea of the depth of that league. And Kentucky is holding their own right now under Mark Pope. And of course, the start has not been as smooth for Coach Cal at Arkansas. The Razorbacks began SEC play with a record of 11-2, and of course, Coach Cal, exercised some revenge, if you will, by beating Oakland on the 30th of December by 30 points. But you know what? Too little, too late. But SEC play has clearly not been as kind to the Razorbacks. They're 1-6 so far within the league. Their only victory came over Georgia. They just lost excuse me, last Saturday at home to Oklahoma, and now we're talking about a Wildcats team pardon me, a Razorbacks team, excuse me, that is 15th out of a 16-team league. Only South Carolina is worse so far this season than the Hogs. So you look at all of this, okay, and it's one of those where one would ask themselves, and there's a couple of questions I'm going to ask here. Has the one and done philosophy for Coach Cal run its course? Has the SEC caught up to John Calipari? And has John Calipari become stale? I'll say it like this. Um, it's one of those where if you go to the well too often, yes, things are going to catch up to you. And it's one of those where the one and done aspect was cute. It was fine 10 years ago. But we got to get away from that. Maybe you get one or two of those kids, but you still want to try to get some kids into your program that can stay there and flourish in a system. That I think is going to be the biggest thing, and I think it's time for Coach Cal to adjust and adapt that philosophy. The SEC, you can make a case to say the SEC has caught up to Coach Cal because it's a deep league, a very talented league with a lot of good coaches. Okay, and it's one of those where you got to bring your A game every single night in the SEC. We're talking about the likes of Bruce Pearl. We're talking about the likes of Rick Barnes. Okay, we're talking about the likes of Chris Beard, just to name a few, as far as how things are going right now in the Southeastern Conference. So yeah, you got to bring the wood every single night. And then of course, some people are going to say, "Well, has Coach Cal become stale?" Well, I will say this: I think anytime you give coaches big contracts like he had at Kentucky, they tend to get comfortable. And I think we saw that over the second half of his time at Lexington. Got a lot of big money to leave Lexington for Fayetteville. But at the end of the day, he's got to produce because the expectations are still there at Arkansas. Okay. The Razorbacks want to get back to what they were under Nolan Richardson. Eric Musselman did have success at Arkansas before he left for USC. He got them to back-to-back Elite Eights in 2021 as well as 2022, and they were one of the upper class teams, if you will, in the Southeastern Conference. So the bottom line is he's got to go out there and take care of his business. But did Coach Cal make the right decision to leave Kentucky? I think so because I think his act had run its course in Lexington. 15 years is a very long time, and again, at a school like Kentucky, I'm not saying that you're expected to win the national championship every single year, but getting knocked out early in the NCAA tournament is not something that is going to fly for this Kentucky basketball program. The folks there want to see deep runs into the NCAA tournament. And like I said, it's not just the fact that they've been getting knocked out in round number one, getting knocked out by double digit seeds. That simply is not going to get it done. So, yes, I truly do think it was time for Coach Cal to exit stage right. And of course, another question for me is, did Kentucky make the right decision to bring in Mark Pope? Absolutely, because Mark Pope is a guy, like I said, he knows what it takes to win in Lexington. He understands the program, and on top of that, Mark Pope, excuse me, is not shabby as a head basketball coach. And if he didn't prove that at BYU, he is definitely proving it now. And I think this Kentucky basketball program is in the right hands for the years to come. So, my final question, or one of my final questions, is what kind of reception will Coach Cal receive tomorrow night at Rupp Arena? I think it's going to be mainly positive. I think there are going to be some boo birds out there, but I think the cheers will far outnumber the boos. It's one of those where he was brought in to bring Kentucky back to national prominence, and he did that, and he had the success early on. And of course, it was highlighted by that national championship, and at the rate that Kentucky was getting to the Final Four initially, or getting to the Elite Eight uh, during, Coach Cal's time in Lexington, it was kind of like a foregone conclusion that this is going to keep happening. But again, his act wore thin. Sometimes, 15 years is a long time, whether it's a working relationship, whether it's a personal relationship, and things change. And I think it was in best interest, or in the best interest, for everybody involved, for Coach Cal to leave, because I think he got comfortable and I think his act got stale there. But nonetheless, I do think that hit the bulk of his reception tomorrow night will be positive, and it should be positive. You're saying it like, Steve, right now you're sounding like excuse me, Curtis Blow's Basketball. I don't know if you remember that song, but yeah. But nonetheless, I do think that it will be positive. I think Coach Cal is going to be amped up for tomorrow night. Definitely, everything aside. I also think, he wants to get a win against a team that his squad is currently looking up at in the standings. And of course, if you're Kentucky, you want to go out there. There's going to be a lot of juice in the arena tomorrow night. And usually on a Saturday night in Lexington, there is some juice, but I think there's going to be more juice than usual. And if you're Kentucky, you're right in that mix, and you're looking good as far as being an NCAA tournament team. But you still got to take care of your business, and you want to get wins. And you just look at that logjam right now of three lost teams in the SEC. You got A&M, you got Ole Miss, Vandy, Kentucky. They're all right in that mix. And then Kentucky's a part of that four-win club as well, with Vandy, Tennessee, and Mississippi State as well. So a lot on the line for both of these teams tomorrow night. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere. I think Arkansas is going to play their tails off to try to get a win for Coach Cal and his return to Lexington. Like I said, I do think there are going to be some boo birds, but I think the bulk of the sounds that you're going to hear for Coach Cal are going to be cheers. And at the same time, but when the ball's thrown up in the air, all bets are off. Okay, at that point, you know what? It's all about cheering for the Kentucky Blue. Make no mistake about it. We might even get a video tribute tomorrow night. Who knows? But nonetheless, it's going to be electric in Lexington tomorrow night for this SEC showdown. You're saying your Reds are clashing a bit tonight, by the way. Well, you know what? It's one of those where the fashion police might have to pull me over, my man. Got the orange behind me for Wahoo Wah, Virginia Cavaliers, of course, the red for the Chicago Bulls. There's some red right there for the Atlanta Braves, and of course, red on my hat for the Niners. But nonetheless, I do think that we are in store for a good old fashioned SEC contest tomorrow night between the Wildcats and the Hogs. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Steve P, my man, as always, it was a pleasure. You know what? If I ever make it onto the late night talk show scene, you're definitely going to be my Ed McMahon. You know what I'm saying? You're not even going to lead the band. You're going to be my Ed McMahon. That's the bottom line, man. But nonetheless, fine folks out there, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.